name's Tracy Brumfield. Native Cincinnatian, lived here all my life. And as Dave said, I'm going to kind of try and share a moment with you. I think both Krista and Mark had a theme in their talk, which was stigma and what that looks like. Because I think if I asked you to picture someone in active heroin addiction, I don't think that you would be hard-pressed to come up with an image. But if I asked you to think of someone in recovery from heroin addiction, unless you know somebody personally, we don't see a lot of that on the news. What we do see is a lot of images like even the original poster promoting this evening, which was a syringe and a spoonful, which I am assuming was not actual heroin. I'm assuming that it was sugar of some kind. But we see this, tonight, News 5, the opioid epidemic, and we see a tie-off or a syringe. But I talked to the promoters of this event, and I told them, to me, heroin it represents hopelessness, feeling trapped. To me, hopelessness is feeling trapped, feeling like you don't have choices. An addiction is horrible. It is a brain and behavioral disease that makes one act compulsively, despite increasing negative consequences. Heroin and opiate addiction specifically acts on the brain in a way that chemically makes it virtually impossible for someone to make rational decisions and choices. Dave introduced me tonight as a Hale Fellowship winner and an executive director, but I'm going to take you back. I'm going to take you back on the journey that got me to this place, because it didn't happen overnight, obviously. And stigma is the #1 barrier to treatment. We lost in the approximation 72,000 people to overdoses in our country last year, which is greater than the number of all Americans that died in Vietnam. So let's just sit with that for a second. In 1 year. Now, I appreciate that awareness is coming, because I'm going to talk about some really intimate things about myself tonight. I'm in recovery from heroin addiction. I've been to jail and prison. I've been homeless. Those are not normally things you want to bring up in a conversation with people, and certainly not intimidating at all to talk to 150 people. But I feel that if we don't come out of the veil of anonymity in the NAs and AAs of the world, and that we speak more openly, I think we are going to put a face to addiction. And when we humanize the disease is when the barriers of stigma begin to deteriorate. So I hope that tonight you will meet many faces, and I hope that you remember this one. I hope that you remember this one as someone who made it out the other side, but I didn't do it alone. I'm going to take you back to a pivotal moment. In the winter of 2014, I found myself homeless, living in my car, in active addiction to heroin, unemployable. They say in recovery you have yets. Like, oh, well, at least I haven't done that. Well, end your sentence with yet. I haven't done it yet. Because for me, there was a ton of yets along my story. I went to treatment in 2009 for opiates and Oxycontin, and everybody was there for heroin, so I'm like, oh, at least I haven't done that. Well, yet. Because I did. But in the winter of 2014, I had a couple of yets waiting for me. One of them was prostitution, and the other was panhandling. Because, I had built a life on being a chameleon and not being seen. And here I was on the corner of Ridge and Madison by Crossroads Church and asking people to see me. You know, well, I remember writing on the cardboard thing, like, what do you write? Homeless, please help if you can. I think there's been one sign I've seen by a guy down by 3rd Street Bridge that says, hey, I'm gonna be honest, I need a beer. I gave him money. Just for being honest. But homeless, please help if you can. And you know, and there would be people that would give me $1, or sometimes a guy walked by and gave me $20. But mostly I stood on that corner and I watched people drive by in cars more expensive than most houses. And they were either on the phone or pretending to be on the phone, or looking straight ahead, you know, not making that eye contact. We've all done it because we feel bad. You know, we make assumptions and judgments about individuals holding that sign, right? All I could do was fucking cry. I just stood there, crying, naked and vulnerable, and asking somebody to fucking see me and help me. But they just drove by. But one person. I can't even recall her face. But I knew that her minivan was beige, and she had kids in the back. And she didn't just roll down the window, she pulled to the side of the road and handed me a fucking sweater. I was speechless, you know. I thanked her and she went on her way, and that cracked open something in me that nothing else on my journey to that day ever could. And that was fucking humanity. Being a fucking human being. I'm not an addict. I'm not a criminal. I'm not homeless because I chose to be. I'm a person in pain. And she saw it and she acknowledged it. And she did something about it. And in that moment, our lives are made up of moments, right? You know, those little things, like Mark going to the Fringe Festival. That's what he said. And Krista with her buddy in her backpack, you know? Like our lives are made up of moments that change us. And that moment changed me. Now, I didn't clean that day, but I knew that it planted something in me, that all my will and desire to be free of this fucking drug that enslaved me for years, more than all my will and prayers, this one act of kindness planted the seed here. Because what she didn't know is I grew up pretty affluent. You know, I was the youngest of 5 kids. We had everything. My dad, you know, he had made his wealth by the time I came along. My parents had 4 kids in 5 years and then waited 5 years to have me. Take the baby with you. They hated me, right? I was the tag along, right? So I felt excluded, even my own family. Shit, they went on a Florida vacation and left me at grandma's. True. You know, I get it. I'm too small to ride and all that shit, but still, how do you think it made me feel, you know? Thanks. And it wasn't the good grandma either, man. It was... You know what I'm talking about. Now, I'm going to share something that's probably going to shock you, so I just want you to just be prepared, but I'm gay. Yay, gay. But when we talk about stigma, imagine growing up fucking gay in the 70s and 80s in Amelia, Ohio. Not particularly a popular thing. So I hid that part of myself. I got used to not wanting to be seen. I got really good at you seeing what I wanted you to see. Right? And that's why my family for years and years didn't know I was addicted. I was good at hiding. When I turned 30 years old, my mom was diagnosed with cancer. You know, I guess I should go back because I was introduced to Percocets when I was 23 because I had migraine headaches. This is how this whole shit started. I remember growing up, Daddy's got a headache. Don't be loud, keep the lights down. It runs in my family. Shit, I got a sibling on disability for migraines right now. If you know anybody that has them, you already know how bad they can be. But the first thing my doctor prescribed me was Percocet. And they worked. They worked on my headaches, and they worked on my cramps, and they worked on my its and ats, and it worked on everything. And it worked so good that I felt like maybe this is how normal people are supposed to feel. Because I felt like away and separate from everybody else. But the thing of it was, is I was in every group. I played sports. I was in the honor classes. I hung out with the stoners. I fit everywhere and belonged nowhere. But when my mom got cancer, this is in '97, so there was a copious amount of Oxycontin available, Dilaudid, Percocet, liquid morphine. And for 8 months, I watched my mom deteriorate. And she died in my arms as I whispered Psalm 23 in her ear. When I said the last word of the prayer, I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever, my mom took her last breath. And I knew right then there's a fucking God. Because he gave us that moment that was just for us. That didn't save me from my addiction then, but it planted a seed, another one of them moments. Click, click, the moments, right? I went to treatment in 2009 for my Oxycontin addiction. And every day there, I was in my 40s. They were 20s. And they all had burn holes in their pants. I was like, what's with the burn holes? Right? It's from nodding out. They was all there on heroin, man. I never knew heroin, didn't know nobody on heroin. I didn't know about heroin. Because that's how I grew up, right? The worst epidemic we had seen was crack. I didn't try that. My addiction was private. It was mine. You saw what I wanted you to see. But in 2009, I tried. Because you know why? Not because I wanted to give it up, but because my supply and demand was not equaling out. My tolerance was here, and what I was being prescribed was about here. That was one of my yets. I didn't do heroin yet. But you can't undo 20 years of behavior in 30 days in a 30-day treatment, which they tried. They tried. Click, another moment, plant a seed. I'd see people in recovery and I wanted what they had, man. They said like addiction. Recovery's like addiction, right? At first it's fun, right? Addiction and drinking, whatever. Then it becomes like, Maintenance, right? And then it becomes work. Well, recovery's the other way. First it's work, then it's maintenance, and then maybe you have some fun, right? You learn to live without this thing that has been yours. The thing that saved me from watching my mom die. The thing that kept me going when I had migraines. The thing that made me feel fucking normal, man. Click. So, my buddy from rehab introduced me to heroin. Then it was, well, at least I'm not shooting up. Yet. Click. In 2010, I was shooting up in my car because I was so sick from withdrawal that I couldn't even make it home. And I didn't hear the car pull in. I didn't hear the door shut. All I knew was I had a syringe and a spoon and a fucking Cincinnati cop knocking on my window. I mean, I saw my whole future, just whatever future I was trying to hold on to based on my current situation. Yeah, I was gone. I got a felony charge for drug possession. I'm a felon now. I tried drug court. I tried treatment in lieu, but their way of treatment was not the level of care that I needed. Now, I believe they have evolved. Like when we clap for Joseph House because they offer medication-assisted treatment now. I think drug court is working now with that because they understand it's evidence-based best practice. But I had to wait until I saw Nora Volkow on Charlie Rose talking about the addicted brain until it clicked. I need behavioral therapy, but I also need medication-assisted treatment. And when you put the two together, your chances of recovery increase dramatically. But before I found that solution, I failed at drug court. And every time you fail, by the way, that's a probation violation. That means your ass goes in jail. Another mugshot. Click. For one charge, I had 8 mugshots. My last violation, she shook her head and sent me to prison for 6 months. Thank you for helping me. I was being punished because I wasn't getting well. Click. So I did the prison thing, I did that, and I came out and I was angry. I was angry for being punished. I was angry that she wouldn't even give me driving privileges to job seek. But I can drive through your neighborhood drunk as fuck and only get a misdemeanor. Huh. Click. They got breathalyzers on the steering wheels so multiple DUI offenders can go to work. But she wouldn't let me go to work. She wouldn't give me driving privileges. I lost my license for a year. I was in prison 6 months and home 6 months in my sister's 1-bedroom apartment, going out of my fucking mind. Click. My addiction said, let's roll. Let's roll. And I did. I took the car I inherited from my mom when she passed away. I called her Bubbles. She was just this tiny little Ford Aspire bubble thing, right? And I just relapsed so hard that a year later I'm on the corner of Madison and Ridge, panhandling. But that seed got planted here, and I've never overdosed because I was always just so timid because I never wanted to die. I didn't want to die, but I didn't know how to live. But the last time I fucking used, I found myself on the bathroom floor, ass up, thought I had had a stroke. I couldn't talk or move my hands properly. It scared the life out of me. So I got recovery, and I went into treatment, and I listened to Nora, and I took the behavioral, and I took the medication, and I fucking am in remission for almost 4 years. You know, that in itself, click, that is a victory. Yeah, I began working at a drug treatment center. I began volunteering and going into the jail and talking to girls who are struggling with heroin addiction, right? My partner and I got custody back of her 10-year-old son. I was living a life of purpose, and I felt blessed, joyful, and that alone would have been enough. I worked third shift, and one morning I got off work. And you remember Leonard Cohen saying hallelujah? I was watching PBS because I got off work and I had to go volunteer. I know I couldn't go to bed. And I was watching this documentary on Leonard Cohen, just about how, you know, he hadn't got fame in America until much later, and he was more than a songwriter, right? He was a true artist. That God, he came to me and he said, you know what, do more. Because I had been praying, when you're ready for me to do more, because people were like, go back to school, be a counselor, be a chemical dependency counselor, or go be a social worker, do something more than mopping floors third shift. And I said, no, I'm a patient gardener. I planted my seeds and I worked my recovery program day after day after day. And that morning, I got the idea that might help more people, because I keep going in the jail and I get to speak every week with these 16 women, which is great, but there's 1,400 people in our county jail, people in our urban core. They release on average 80 people a day back into your community, our community. And a lot of them don't know where to go. I'm sorry, my alarm's going on. Now, as Dave said, the only way to logistically reach these individuals would be through a printed medium, a newspaper, I thought. So that morning, I grabbed a notebook and I sketched out what would be the first edition of a newspaper. It just came. 40 minutes, I looked, and I had the first edition of Rise. I went into the jail and talked to the girl I was volunteering with. She's like, you know what? That's a fucking great idea, and I think I know where you might get funded for that. Shut up. Click. And you better do it, because I think there's only 10 days left to apply. True story. So I went home, I looked up People's Liberty, and she was right. There was about 10 days left in the window to apply for the Hale Fellowship for 2017. They make it very accessible to normal people. It's not some big grant application. It's 4 words. Who are you? What's your idea? Why do we need it? And why's now the right time? And I told them. And I told them about me and what you wouldn't see on my resume. I've been in prison, in jail. I'm in recovery from heroin addiction. But this is why I have passion for this project and why I know it is needed. And 3 weeks later, I had a $100,000 grant to make it happen. So the Hale Fellowship is amazing. It's this 1-year accelerated sabbatical fellowship where you just go. And they give you the money, it's your stipend, and you go and you make your project happen. My project was up in April of this year, and that could have been it. But nah, God still got plans for me. My mentor, Chris Botnick with the Hale Foundation, said, you ain't done, and we want to help fund you to be your own nonprofit. Click. So I stand before you today, an executive director of a small nonprofit called Rise Up News. We publish a newspaper called Rise, Re-Enter into Society Empowered. We launched the project here in Cincinnati. We're in 4 correctional facilities here, and we just launched our first out-of-town pilot edition in Montgomery County and Dayton. Click, click. You know, so I have been blessed with a life in recovery. I have been blessed that it didn't take my life. I've just been blessed. I hope that tonight, somewhere, something I said clicked with you in terms of what recovery might look like, what recovery can do, what addiction feels like. I ask you, please see that person on the side of the road. You don't got to give them nothing, just a nod and how you doing. Acknowledge. See. Because I've seen what I can't unsee. And I am compelled for the rest of my life to do something about it. And I want to thank each and every one of you for purchasing a ticket to be here tonight to learn about this life and death epidemic. So thank you all.